This episode of the Better Two podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and DM Needham, author of My Days with the Dark Muse, as well as Love is Worth Waiting For. Hi, gang. Donna here. Thanks for tuning into the Better Two podcast. Today's guest is Melissa Oatman. Melissa and I talk about grief, abandonment issues, and, well, how she got married to somebody who she really shouldn't have married. And even though the signs were there, she still did it because she thought she was giving her twins the life that they needed. Stay tuned. Hi, Melissa. How are you doing today?
I am so very well. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, I'm glad we finally got this together. I mean, there's been some snafus and finally it worked out, and it worked out the way it was supposed to.
Exactly.
So when we first started talking, you had mentioned that you had gotten married, even though you knew you shouldn't. And that was kind of the way my first marriage went as well. But tell me about your experience with that.
So I met my partner whenever I was in my early 20s. And it started off as a great relationship. You know, I remember thinking the whole time, like, oh, this guy's too good to be true. And it turns out he was, because he wasn't at all who he seemed to be. And the more we got into the relationship, the more I started to see like red flags. But back in those days, I kind of ignored all of the red flags. I had enough of them that I could have made my own quilt with them, but I ignored them. And we really progressed quickly into a relationship. And so it ended up that I ended up pregnant with twins.
Wow.
And that was unexpected and big oops, you know. So I tried to create a life for them that I thought was best. And so that included marrying their dad. And the whole time I remember getting ready for the wedding, my dad said to me, oh, you don't really have to do this. And in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, I don't really want to do this. I don't know why I'm doing this. I thought it was the right thing to do at the time. You know, I just thought, oh, it would be better for them. And I even remember walking down the aisle, I kept tripping over my dress. And I think that was probably the universe going, no, stop, go back.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? But I did it anyway. And we were only married for probably 6 months. And it got to the point that I was so depressed that I didn't even want to wake up in the morning. I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning because he was more verbally than anything abusive. In one sentence, he would call me names that were horrible that I've never even had people call me before. And then in the next breath, calling me an angel. And it was just confusing. I thought I was crazy. Like, what is happening? And my family could see it. They didn't really care for him, and they knew that something was wrong. And I just kind of felt like a zombie. And that's exactly how my family described me. They said you would come over and visit and you would sit in a chair and it was just like a blank wall. You know, you didn't really respond to things. And I think that was like a disassociation. Like I felt like if I didn't feel anything, then I couldn't feel when he was causing me pain, emotional pain. The only problem with that is then I also didn't experience the joys in life, like having young twins who make you laugh and smile. And so one day I thought it wasn't fair of them to have a mom who was just disconnected and not even there. So I decided to ask for a divorce, and it was very frightening because, again, he was like 6'4" and 250 pounds, and I'm 5'0", and you know, this little person. So it took a lot of courage to stand up for myself and to walk away from that situation. And it didn't get a lot easier after that because I still had to co-parent with him. So it was several years of me learning how to stand up for myself, how to set healthy boundaries for myself. It took a long time to learn how to play the game, or to realize that if I didn't play the game, it wasn't fun for him anymore. And so he stopped harassing me and trying to use the kids to get to me. And it led to me going through a couple of what I call like a spiritual awakening, trying to figure out what's my purpose in life. There has to be more to this. So it actually led to me creating my own podcast. I started searching for answers. What's the meaning of life? What am I supposed to be doing in this world? I didn't come here just to be miserable. And I started studying and researching, doing all of these things. I became a Reiki practitioner. I'm also a teacher, just a public school teacher by day. So it was all about wanting to help people. And so in learning and healing myself, I ended up creating this podcast called Awaken Your Inner Awesomeness to help other people learn how to heal with more grace and ease and just to live their best lives. And then wrote a book called Beautifully Broken, which is my story. It's part my story of how I survived divorce and the whole situation. Also, there's humor in it because I believe that humor is really healing. My friend said that I was the first one bringing all of the Karen jokes because I do have a lot of them in my book, but also bringing tools and tips that I learned along the way to help me heal and realize I had to love myself before I could have anyone else love me. I had to really get to know myself, love myself, and heal the deep inner wounding that I had from childhood. So it's been quite a journey.
Which that's exactly what I was going to ask. It's like, what kind of childhood wound did you have that sets you up for this marriage? Because when we make that leap into that first marriage, most of the time, if we do it in our early 20s, we don't really have a full concept of who we are. And I don't want to say we're looking to get out the house because I wasn't. It's just a matter of there's some kind of core wound, the Chiron issue,
Yeah.
that is kind of bubbling under that even when we think we've defeated it, it still comes back. So what was
Yeah.
yours?
So my parents divorced when I was 3. And I'm also technically the middle child because I have twin sister, but she was born with partial nerve deafness and wore hearing aids. So I had an older brother who's 4 years older, and then I have a younger sister. And I always kind of felt like I had to take on the role of peacekeeper in the family because, my parents divorced, even though later and eventually they got along great, even up until my mother just recently passed and even up until the end. But when we were kids, it was very contentious and for understandable reasons, but we always kind of felt like we were in the middle, or at least I did. And I always felt like I had to keep you happy, I have to keep you happy. And so I became the people pleaser. And that was the role that I took on. I also think I probably had like abandonment issues because my dad leaving when I was 3 and then moved away when I was 9. And so even though he moved away for his job and even though I talked to him on the phone once a week, like he wasn't physically there for the day-to-day stuff that, you need your dad for. And I think just in general, not really knowing who I am because as a middle child, you sort of take on that here, like I need to be seen and heard, and you feel like you're not in a family, and it just naturally sort of happens that way. So for me, I think it was those deep issues of feeling like I had to live up to a certain standard so that I would be seen, and also the fear of just being abandoned and that I wasn't lovable. So I had to work on all of those issues, which I did. Well, like one of the first things I did, well, I started counseling, which is great. They said, here are your issues, but it wasn't so great with this. This is how you solve those issues. I feel like I only got so far, and it's like, okay, you're just saying the same thing over and over again, and it's not really helping. So I started seeking the spirituality aspect of that, and I took a course on self love
Mhm.
and learning how to flip the script, if you will, like stop beating yourself up and learning how to love yourself and be your biggest cheerleader, and learning about attachment styles and how the way that we attach to our parents has a big effect on the way that we attach to other people, and learning about what a healthy attachment is and what an unhealthy attachment is. And I kept finding people who realized that I was a people pleaser and a giver and would take, 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 take. And then I was left completely depleted in the relationship and even lost myself in the relationship. So I stayed single for a long time, not even dating, just to work on myself. And then got back out there again and have realized, that now I'm dating on my terms. And as soon as I see those red flags, now I can recognize it and move on and realize that what's meant for me and what's for me is going to work out, and it's not going to be the struggle, and it's not going to be what it's been in the past. And so that's helped me actually in a lot of areas of my life.
And I mean, that's the thing. I don't think a lot of people look at the divorce, they think, oh, we got a divorce, doesn't matter. But it has a long-term effect on the child. And
Mm-hmm.
nobody really realizes that.
Yeah, it really does. And even with my own children, realizing I wanted to get away from my ex so that they wouldn't see the abuse. But then he went on and got married again and did the same thing to his next wife. And so they saw it anyway, and they were around it anyway. And there wasn't really anything that I could do to keep them from that, because the law states that they
Right.
have to be able to go with their dad. I mean, we even went to court, and I tried to say, look, this is detrimental to them, but they don't care. And actually, my ex ended up committing suicide a couple of years ago, because there was a lot of, I think, mental illness going on there. And sadly, my kids were around that. So, they're doing counseling and therapy and things too, because I think we have to recognize that mental health is so super important, and it's important to heal yourself from all of the things you've gone through. Life is not easy. I don't think anyone skates by.
No, and what you were describing when you were describing your ex, it sounded a lot like my mother, because my mother would be one minute your champion, the next minute you were Satan. Not
Yeah,
that drastic, but I mean it was along those lines. And ultimately she did what your ex did. Ultimately she did take herself out. And that's a whole nother battle. And especially when you're a kid, that's like the biggest form of abandonment you can get.
yeah, yeah. And I'm so sorry to hear that. And I do know what a how tragic that is and how hard that is, because and my kids, when that happened too, they were so conflicted with, I love this person because this was my dad, and also I hate this person because this is what he did to me. And it's really difficult to have to watch your child go through that too, and try to be there for them. And it sucks to know that decisions you made kind of contributed to that, right? Like, oh, I didn't have to put them in this situation. But also, I'm a big believer too of not looking back on our past with shame and regret, because there's nothing you can do to go back and change anything that's happened in the past. But what we can do is take those lessons and say, okay, this happened. What did I learn from it? And how can I take that? And how can I make better decisions in the future? How can I help myself in the future? And I think that's really the important thing to do.
Right. And I mean, when I look back at the 20-year-old me, one thing I swore, because I married my first husband when I was 26, even though we lived together 3 years prior. And we had his two stepkids. And I swore that I never wanted to put a kid through what I went through with a divorce. And we were married less than a year. Formally, we were married longer than that because both of us drug our feet about the legality of who was paying for the divorce. But I had to walk away from the kids. And I know that that caused them an abandonment trauma, which I didn't want to do. But I ultimately had to do it for myself. So I understand your side of the story. And when I look back, which has been a real hard thing now, all of a sudden it's like being placed in front of me that you have to look back at these wounds and look at the choices you've made. And the abandonment issue is something that's really real with more people than, everybody's like, well, maybe you have that if you were adopted. Well, yeah, some adopted kids have that, but you can have a normal family life and still feel totally abandoned and alone. And I don't think we look at those things. We just think that you should buck it up and keep going. And the fact of the matter is that those wounds will ultimately make your choices. I mean, I look at my last marriage, and I had a wonderful husband. We had 16 wonderful years. However, when we first got together, he told me, he's like, I'm going to die. And I'm like, yeah, well, I could die tomorrow too. I put it off. But then subconsciously, I have to ask myself, did I set myself up knowing already that he was going to eventually abandon me?
Yeah.
I don't think, normally you don't think like that. But then when you start unpacking your little issues, you go, well, wait a second. Did I set myself up for this? I had 16 years with him. Some of them were great. Some of them, because of his illness, weren't. But I had somebody love me unconditionally. So it wasn't like it was the most horrendous marriage. But did I set myself up knowing this? But the truth of the matter is, there's a chance no matter who you get with, the relationship's not gonna last.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, it's my belief that we come here to learn certain things. And for many of us, we signed up to deal with the abandonment issue. But what I think we don't always understand is that it starts with us when we abandon ourselves, and we abandon ourselves when we're being inauthentic and when we're not living our lives the way that we want to live it, and we think we have to live up to everyone else's standard of what we should be or who we should be. That's the first moment that we actually face abandonment, is when we're not true to ourselves. And we learn that from a young age because we seek validation from everyone else. It starts with your parents, right? You want to make them proud, you want to make them happy. And I heard a psychologist talking not too long ago, and I loved what she said, because she said, as parents, what we should be saying to our children is not, I'm proud of you, but you should be so proud of yourself. And then follow it with, I'm proud, because we should be teaching them to be self sufficient and seeking validation from within instead of from others, because I think that is one of the main reasons we end up in relationships that fail, because we're trying to seek our worth in someone else. So we need someone else to tell us, you're beautiful, you're smart, you're talented, you're this, you're that, when we should be feeling that way about ourselves. And when we fill ourselves up, then when someone comes along, it's like they can compliment us. I hate that saying, like, you complete me. Like, nobody should ever complete you. You're a complete and whole person yourself. Someone can compliment you, but it's like in a relationship, if you imagine two circles, they should touch, but they should, and maybe like a Venn diagram where they overlap a little bit, but there should still be part of that circle that's outside of each other, so that, you have this life. You don't just completely abandon your friends and your family and just solely are consumed in this relationship. And so much of the time, that isn't how it is. People feel like they have to be completely consumed by their partner, and that's not healthy. And those unhealthy attachments, that's when the trouble starts.
Yeah. And I mean, but that's the way people want it. Unfortunately, it's like that's what we're taught, that, the fairy tale prince is supposed to come in and rescue the princess.
Right.
But that's not the truth. And I've brought this movie up. I don't even remember the name of it. It was a Hugh Jackman movie. And it talks about they have this machine where they can go back and look at past memories. And so he's on a date with this girl, and this girl's like, tell me a happily ever after. And he's like, well, that would have, or a happy ending. And he's like, that would have to be in the middle of the story, because ultimately the happy ending, somebody dies, the relationship ends. So it has to be in the middle of the story. But yet, and I'm an author, just like you, it's like everybody wants that happily ever after. It's like, it
Mhm.
doesn't work that way. We're here to be who we need to be and experience life with many different people. Now, I'm not saying many relationships as far as romantic, but we're here to grow. Somebody, somebody yesterday was talking about trigger warnings, and it kind of hit me that all this talk about trigger warnings, and yes, there's a lot of triggers out there, but the fact of the matter is, if it really triggers you, it's because you haven't done the work
Mhm.
and you're not willing to face it.
Yeah. Yeah, those triggers happen for a reason. This is pointing you to what is still there, that is unhealed, and that you do need to heal. And I want to circle back to what you were talking about when people think, oh, well, the many loves in your life. That word soulmate gets thrown around so much. And everyone always thinks when you hear soulmate, it's your other half and who you're supposed to spend your life with. But we have many, many different soulmates in our lives. Soulmates are just someone we've have a contract with, a soul contract. We came here to experience something in life, to learn and to grow. Sometimes they're our family, sometimes they're our friends, and yes, sometimes they're romantic people. And a romantic soulmate isn't someone that you're necessarily meant to spend the rest of your life with. It's about learning and growing. And I think, as you said, those triggers, people don't want to have to deal with that. I'll deal with that later. But as I talk about in my book, it doesn't go away. And you're just pushing it down deeper and deeper. And then one night when you're drinking too many drinks with your friends and you get triggered, you're going to ugly cry in a bar in front of people. And that's not always a cute little picture. And it's uncomfortable. So it's better to deal with what comes up as it comes up, and those triggers, even though we don't like them. They're very uncomfortable. They're very necessary because, again, it is showing you the work you still have to do on yourself.
That's the thing. People, especially as we age, people will be like, well, an 18-year-old girl would never think like that. Oh, really? An 18-year-old girl wouldn't think like that. Yes, she would. She has, I mean, no disrespect to 18-year-olds, but I know 18-year-olds in my generation, we were willing to do things that most likely I would not do today. I would not do anything like that today. But it's like, okay, back then, sure, I'll try that. But we don't. The thing is, we have to look back at our 18-year-old selves and our 20-year-old selves that made these choices, not mistakes. We have to say choices, because then you devalue what you did. And even though you did it and it may not have worked out, it still made you who you are. And I think that's the grace that we have with the choices that we make in our lives, that nobody really commends us. And one thing, when you were talking about parenting, I remember being in my 30s and talking to my dad, because my mom was always notorious for going, one day, you can do anything you want. Okay. That you put your mind to it. All right. Positive, right? And then she'd turn around and say, you're going to fall flat on your face one day. Okay. So I remember being in my 30s. My mom was long gone. And I remember being in my 30s and sitting with my dad. And I'm like, Dad, are you proud of me? And he looks at me and he goes, why does it matter? And I was just like, what? I said, what do you mean? He goes, why does it matter? He's like, you have a roof over your head, you have food, you have a car, you have a job. What does it matter if I'm proud of you? I'm like, well, what happens if I fall on my face? He goes, you get up, dust yourself off, and keep going. Now, that being said, my dad is a great man at avoiding things and avoiding his feelings, but it was still a nice piece of information. And it was just kind of like, if we taught our kids that you don't have to do that, you don't have to make me proud. But yet my mom was always the one, you better bring home this, you better bring home these grades. Okay. What do you
Yeah.
want for your birthday? Good grades.
Yeah, we set people up, and society does it too. We
Mhm.
reward good behavior and we punish bad behavior, and
Well, with
a
social
little
media,
bit.
we have started to reward bad behavior as well.
Oh yes, that's true. I mean, I'm a teacher. We've had these TikTok trends that, like, destroying public bathrooms. Like, really? Can we not do that?
Wow.
Yeah. But
Wow.
I think we're starting to maybe see a little bit. I'm hoping this new generation coming in too, that it's important to focus on other things, not like the material things, right? Like, you have to have this great job, you have to be married, you have to have 3.2 kids. We're seeing people coming in saying, no, I don't want that, like rejecting societal norms, which is actually a really good thing, because not everybody is made to go to college, because it's not where they're successful and they're not happy. The big thing is being happy. To
Mhm.
me, success comes when you find things that make you happy and you're fulfilled. But we just keep shoving kids into college, like, you need to pick what you want to do for the rest of your life when you're 18. And as an 18-year-old, I was an idiot. So, like, why are you expecting me to pick a lifelong career at 18? Because I don't know what I'm doing.
I had a friend whose kids were in junior high in Texas, and they were like, because they're part of the STEM program, they had to start looking at colleges in junior high. And I'm thinking, in junior high, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
There's no way. And,
Yeah.
and and to put that kind of pressure on a child or a teenager to be, I mean, they got enough pressure now. Not that we didn't, but they have more pressure on us with social media, and you need to look this, you need to dress this way. And then we have the whole, some people follow reality TV. And the truth of the matter is, most of that is, at least, if not scripted, some shows are scripted and some are manipulated. So
Right.
it's not
Exactly.
reality, but we've taught bad behavior
Yeah.
because of it.
Yeah, and anxiety levels in kids are just through the roof these days. And a lot of people, they complain, oh, this new generation, oh, millennials. And we didn't have to deal with all of the things they had to deal with. We didn't have to do active shooter drills in schools, and
Mm-mm.
we didn't have to worry about if I did something dumb and someone recorded it, it went on social media and everyone saw it. We didn't have to worry about those things. And I do believe that social media, phones, all of those things have contributed to the levels of anxiety that we're seeing in kids. And it's really sad. And I think that focusing on the wrong things in schools is also sad. We should be teaching them how to deal with emotions. We should be teaching them how to be mindful. We should be teaching all of these things because that's what's going to really help them in today's world. I mean, there's so much going on right now. And, we come from a generation of people who really didn't deal with their emotions, and we see where that's gotten us.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing. So I think that is something that, we should be teaching more of those things in school, and teaching kids how to be more empathetic and how to really build themselves up, how to love themselves. Because, we know
Mm-hmm.
that kids come from environments sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the things they have to deal with. How are they expected to then learn on top of that?
I mean, I was at one point, I was at an all-girl Catholic school. So, this is a private school, it costs money. And all my friends had really nice houses and stuff. And I lived in a shotgun house. And at one point, it was a rental, we had a hole in our bathroom floor where a rat came through. But yet, I would never tell my friends. I would always act like, yeah, everything's fine. But the truth is, there was a lot going on that people didn't know. My grandma and I used to have to walk to the laundromat. I mean, but you don't put that image out there because you want to be liked.
Yeah.
You want to be you want to be known in it. And being in a private school, I will say this: it was easier to deal with how to dress in the morning because you had a uniform. Going to public school for my last 2 years and moving to a different part of the state, I suddenly have my mom's hand-me-downs. I had acne, and I'm suddenly with boys again, and I have not a concept on how to do any of this. And when you get picked on and you really want to have that comfort from your mom, you know, all she does is go, "Well, I got my own problems," and slams her bedroom door in your face. You're like, "Okay, so I got to figure this out." And the thing is, I think kids nowadays, with all the, I mean, parents are distracted. A lot of parents are distracted, and I'm not knocking them, but between their bills, what's going on in the world, watching TV, being on their phone, it's hard being a parent nowadays. And so, how do you find that balance to be a parent and still, and have your kids' needs met? That was a big question that's been posed to me recently: is were your needs met? And you have to really look back at your life and go, were my needs met as a kid? Were my needs met as a teen? And what was lacking? And then figure out how you fix that for yourself now.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people don't even know what their needs are. They don't understand what would make me happy. If you sit down and ask somebody if you could have the perfect day that would just make you incredibly joyful, what would that entail? And a lot of people don't even know. Like, if you had unlimited funds and you had unlimited time, what would you do with yourself? Some people can't answer that question because we just don't even know ourselves. I think we run from everything. And like you said, it's very easy to disconnect with social media, with our phones, with Netflix, all of the things that we have. It's easy to distract yourself. So, a big part of, I think, living a life that is joyful, that you feel fulfilled, is getting to know yourself, because we dishonor ourselves so many times by doing things we don't want to do that really don't make us happy. We get stuck in jobs that are dead end jobs. We hate going to work every day. We get stuck in relationships where we don't even want to look at our partners anymore. There's just no communication, and all of those things happen because we aren't really honoring who we are and who we want to be. And sometimes it is because we don't know who we are.
True. And social media allows us to create this image of, oh, look at the smiling face. I'm here with my husband, or I'm here with my wife.
Yeah.
But are we really happy?
Yeah.
Or are we putting on this picture? I remember people telling me about my first marriage that you and your husband, you're going to have a bunch of kids. I see you guys lasting forever. And another friend of ours, they were like, oh, you guys won't make it. They made it a little bit longer than us, I think by 3 years, but we didn't. They were like, I see you having lots of kids. Guess what? I have no bio kids. And I mean, these were just friends who saw what they wanted to see, the perception that was painted for them. And it
Yeah.
wasn't that we were putting on airs or setting it up that way. It's what they read about our relationship, what they saw. But I can look at pictures that we took at like the photo studio or whatever. And the girls and I are connected, but my husband's totally disconnected.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
And that's the thing. I mean, people generally don't put their worst side out on social media. So comparing others is just a futile activity because you're not on the same journey. You don't have the same path. It's okay to say, I know I want these things for myself, but not, oh, I want so and so's life. You don't know what's going on in their life behind closed doors. And oftentimes, if you look at somebody and say, oh, I want that, and then a couple of months later, everything falls apart for that person, and you think, wow, I had no idea, because nobody puts on Facebook, my life sucks and I hate everything about it. I mean, some people do, but most people are not going to put that on social media. So we really only see the really good things and that are happening in their lives.
When my husband, when he died initially, because he died a couple of times, when he died initially, the easiest way to do this was on my personal Facebook page to tell our friends and family what was going on instead of making multiple phone calls. I made a video and I deleted the video eventually, but it was easier for me to do that. But I didn't put it on Instagram. I didn't put it anywhere where it was public. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. You have to hide that. And I had a guest on the show who when he was 14, he wanted that perfect Facebook picture. And then he decided to take a flying leap off a building and he ended up being paralyzed
Wow.
because once he got that picture, he still didn't get the gratification that he wanted.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We created a society that's instantaneous. So we always want that instant gratification. And when we're talking here, it's like I remember being a little kid. Now this is really, and it's we didn't have cable at first. And so the TV went off at midnight with the flag and taps being, and that was it. There was no entertainment. And so nowadays it's like you you can't sleep, you can get up, you can read, which we could read back then, but you got to go dial exactly what you want to watch on TV. Scroll through TikTok. While TikTok, I do have an account and I do readings on there. It is a time suck. It really is. Out of all of them, because you can just get sucked in so easily.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, that happened to me last night because I couldn't sleep. I was like, oh, okay. And for me, it's always like animal videos because they always make me laugh. And I feel better. Animals are really amazing creatures. But yeah, we can avoid anything. And I think a lot of people do. I think we get into these behaviors like if you're addicted to shopping, addicted to drugs and alcohol, we're doing these things because what we're really truly trying to avoid is sitting with ourselves and facing everything that's happening. It really hasn't been that long since my mother passed. She had pancreatic cancer and passed in January. And we had like a year and a half that we knew, and we tried to do everything, and she tried to fight. And at first they were like, yes, you can beat this. And then it was too much for her body. And it's easy to bury your head in other things to avoid having to deal with the pain. But I always tell people the pain doesn't go away. Like, it's still going to be there. And when you're grieving, it's like, I like to consider it to be like waves, like the ocean. Some days it's very calm and gentle, and you think everything's going to be okay. Like, I can get through this. And then the wave comes crashing in. And one day you feel like, how am I supposed to get through the rest of my life with this happening? And it's a difficult journey, but it's important to go through the journey. And there are so many tools that can help people. But the biggest thing is feeling the feelings that you're feeling, actually experiencing the emotions. Because when we don't, they sort of collect in a reserve deep down inside. And then those lovely triggers come up. And then we're so overwhelmed with the emotion that we don't know what to do with it.
Right.
But if we're, dealing with it all along, it makes it a lot easier to deal with. And there's also mindset is a big thing too. We can look at life as this wasn't fair. I'm so angry this wasn't fair. And yet it's perfectly normal to feel that way when bad things happen to you. But if you stay in that place of this isn't fair and the victim, you're going to keep finding more and more things about your life to feel like you're being made a victim of. If instead we can shift that and flip the script a little bit, and for instance, with my mom and that whole situation, instead of looking at, oh my gosh, this was such a huge loss, look at what we lost, I look at how much we had. Like, look how much love there was. They say the bigger the grief you experienced, it was because the love was so big. And if we can look at, I can look at, I'm going to have this many more years without my mom. Or I can look at, I had this many years with her and we experienced all of these beautiful and amazing things. I can choose what I want to focus on. And I think that if we decided to do that instead with everything that happens in your life, it doesn't have to be death, but let's say that, you lose a job. You can say, look what I lost, or you can say, this is an opportunity for me to have something better. Maybe the universe was trying to point me in a different direction because I wasn't on my path. Maybe this wasn't my purpose. So we can look at things in a different way, and that helps, I think, too, to shift some of that negativity and the pain and the things that we're feeling. I think for me, it helps to try to look at things differently.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know it's not an easy journey when you know that the person. I was told in September of 2019 that my husband was on borrowed time, and the fact is that the doctor did not tell my husband this. I went to pick him up from the hospital, and I'm like, "Did somebody talk to you?" Oh, they said everything was fine. And I thought to myself, I love him dearly, but I am not going to be the one to tell him this. I mean, he already knew he had heart trouble and kidney problems and stuff. So it wasn't that it was something unknown, but still, I'm not going to be the one to tell him that the clock is ticking.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the physician's assistants came in, then I knew, and I'm like, look, I pulled her out in the hall. I'm like, no one told him. So she told him, and he had a panic attack on the way home.
Yeah.
And he ended up back in the hospital because he wasn't he was having problems breathing and everything else. And I remember coming home that night and writing as if I had lost him. And it ended up morphing into one of my characters for my story. But after that time, until he died, like about 2 months before he died, I started writing a piece as a widow who lost her husband. And it wasn't that I consciously made that choice, it was just where the characters were leading me. And my husband would come by and he'd be smiling at me and I'd be bawling my eyes out. And he'd stop at my doorway of my office and I'd just look at him and smile and quit crying. And then he'd go back and I'd start crying again as I was writing. So it was like I had already started grieving before, but that did it make it easier? Sure. But then there was another whole caveat that, like you said, it comes in waves. And some days you think, okay, I've managed this. And then an anniversary will hit.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody asked me, because for me personally, I counted that whole first year. It's like, okay, we're 1 month. It's been 2 months. And some people ask me, they're like, well, why do you count it? It's like, because you're counting it because it's like, I've survived this long without this person. I've made it through this long. And I just hit the 2 year mark last month. So it's like, it's hard to believe it's been 2 years, but I have survived it and I will continue on. And that's the thing. It's like, you're trying to, it's not that you're avoiding depression, you're just making a mile marker that I've survived.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't diminish anything, doesn't diminish your feelings or anything, but I survived and I will continue.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's a very difficult thing. With my mom, no one said you have this amount of time, or, and
They
then
didn't.
when we were in the hospital, all of a sudden a doctor came in and said, you maybe have 6 months. And we didn't know anything at that point. and we were angry, and she passed a few days later. So it just, there's no, and I think the lesson in that is we're not guaranteed anything in life.
No, no.
And you have to live in the present moment fully every day and appreciate what you have, because it can be gone tomorrow. And I think part of the lesson of those losses is learning how to, again, be in the present and to appreciate the love that you have when you have it, or the thing that you have when you have it, because anything could happen. And we're learning that so much. I mean, with COVID,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's lives were just flipped upside down. People lost jobs, people, lost loved ones, and people lost their health. It's really a wake up call that we need to be living more mindfully and really making the most, while we're not just going through life on autopilot. I
Right,
think
right.
so many of us are going through life on autopilot, and that's not living. You're not
No,
living. You're just surviving.
no. And I mean, when you were talking about your mom, it's like for my husband, when they told us he was on borrowed time, it got to a point and I didn't realize the anxiety I put myself under. Nobody thinks about that. Nobody thinks about, but there's the fact of I go to bed at night and it's like every night when every morning when I wake up, it's like, okay, is this going to be the time I wake up and he's gone in the bed with me? He didn't pass like that, but it's like one of those things. And going and on to that statement is my grandmother. Um, I went down to see my grandmother. She was in New Orleans. She had fallen and they were vacuuming blood out of her lungs. She's talking to her mother. And that's never, as an intuitive, this is not a good sign. This means
Yes,
it's time
right.
she's gonna go. They're like, well, can we operate on her leg? Because I'm like, that's fine. Okay, she makes it. I'm like, okay. So she wakes up after the surgery. This is like several days later. Her lungs have kind of calmed a little bit. They're like, we're gonna have to put her in hospice. I'm like, okay. So put her in hospice. Katrina happened. Well, she got kicked out of hospice. I should say this first. She got kicked out of hospice, went to a care facility, Katrina came, got kicked out of there, and then came to live with us. And she was in a care facility up here because she needed to learn how to walk again. And anyway, long story short, she survived a year and a half after that diagnosis of she most likely is not going to make the night. And I often look at it this way. She died about a month and a half after I married my husband, my second husband. And I think a lot had to do with she kept fighting because she would tell me all the time, I'm going to die. I think she fought because she wanted to make sure I was okay. So I think that's another thing about us. Sometimes we find that resilience in ourselves to keep going because we want to make sure everything is okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they talk about that all the time. I was just watching a special last night on near death experiences. They've always fascinated me. What people see and when they come back. And in all of them, the people were told they had a choice, that they could go or they could come back. And it was up to them. And it's interesting because they all describe being in a place that was so blissful and so joyful and so peaceful. And you think, why would you want to come back from a place like that? Because sometimes Earth is definitely not joyful and blissful and peaceful. But most of them said they knew they had to come back because for some of them, I saw my children and I knew that they still needed me, or I still had to help with this or with that. So it's really interesting to see people who fight and are resilient and will come back, and people who, and it's understandable if they've been fighting a long time, who wouldn't want to just surrender. And that's another thing that I think maybe can comfort you during the grieving process too, is understanding that the person we lost is blissful and joyful and happy and having a wonderful time. We're the ones who are struggling with it. And I always think about this, oh, I would love to have my mom back, but I would never want her back sick. I would
Right,
never want her to come back and be hurting or in pain or
right.
miserable. So I'm happy she's where she is. It's just, I have to get to the place where I can be okay with that.
Hmm. The first dream I had after my husband passed, he's like, "Hi, honey, I'm home for dinner." I'm like, "Okay, what do you want?" He's like, "A bologna sandwich." I'm like, "Of all the things."
Yeah.
But I had lady on Kalea, and she has had several near death experiences. And she wasn't given the option a lot of the time. So it was just like, your job is not done. You're supposed to go down there and help people. So your job's not done. So bye. I mean, you're given this nice little few moments of grace, and then and she said, she was faced with reviewing her life as well.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
I've heard that very commonly, and I did a podcast episode about what is a life review, and that's really interesting. But last night, the people when the show I was watching were talking about how it wasn't done in judgment. It was just a very
right,
comfortable watching over your life. And I think, and of course, I know sometimes have big religion to think for this, but many people are afraid of death. They just fear it. And I know my mom did. She was afraid. She didn't want to die. And we kept talking to her. She was a very spiritual person, and but grew up in church her whole life. And we kept telling her, it's not like what the church tells you, yeah, maybe you've made mistakes. Maybe you didn't live your life perfectly. But that's okay. It's not going to matter. You're still going to go to a place where you're going to be welcomed with open arms, and you're going to feel love and peace and all of that. And I think that a lot of people are afraid of that. They're afraid of what happens because we're afraid of the unknown, which is natural. But I think a lot of people still have this idea that you're going to hell and you're going to burn and it's going to be horrible. And I just wish we could get maybe past that stigma of that's not really what it's about. I mean, we're all learning. It's all a journey, and we're all here learning.
and I mean, personally, I believe that reincarnation. I think that we have reincarnated, and that's how we keep evolving. But we are
Exactly.
taught, the organized religion for the most part teaches us guilt and shame.
Right.
Everything is guilt and shame. But the funny thing is, if you pulled back the curtain, these people have done some more atrocities than we ever could. Somebody actually shared a meme yesterday, and it was to knock religion, and it was a meme of Dorothy and pulling the curtain back on the Wizard of Oz. And when you think about it, that really does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, it really, the purpose, I think, a lot of times is just to control people
Hmm.
and for power. And there's so much you could talk about with religion that probably we shouldn't get into, but it'd be
Yeah,
a
I
long,
understand
long
completely.
show.
Yeah, we could get in trouble. And
Yeah.
I've said some things on here, I'm sure. So I've talked to people of different faiths. I have an episode that hasn't come out yet where I talk about reincarnation with this gentleman. And he talks about how, there's a darker side that controls everything, that controls the media and everything. And they want us to feed on that negative energy. And if we actually all got together and sent love out, this world would be a much better place. But we all get caught in the fear and the worry constantly because that's
Hmm.
what we're taught.
Exactly. We are. I mean, that is what sells is fear. That's what sells in the media. And it's true. I actually take breaks. I don't watch the news faithfully and regularly every night. I just kind of check for updates here and there, but I don't because I don't want to feed into the fear, and I don't want to feed into it's horrible to see all of the people who are just spewing hate. And that's not what we're here for. We're here to raise the entire vibration of the collective. And the only way to do that is with love, because love is the highest vibration. And if we would remember, we're all one, we're all here to help
Well,
one another.
well, that's what's so funny. Star Wars is so popular, but they really miss the whole fact that the Force, it's what surrounds us, combines us, brings us together. Wait a second. The same thing. And I've talked to a neuroscientist. Same thing. We are all connected. You and I both agree on this. It's like people don't see that though. They want to be they're so stuck on, I have to be right.
Right.
Well,
Right.
why? Why?
And if it's different, you're
Mhm.
wrong, I'm right. It's very, it's a complex issue, but we can disagree on things,
Mhm.
still not hate each other.
Right.
We don't have to agree 100% on everything. And you have to resonate with what your truth is. But also, in doing so, we have to be more cognizant of if what I'm doing is hurting people or is it helping people.
Right.
Even when you vote, when you go out and you do that, we have to be more aware of, are these policies helping the general public or are they hurting people? We have to really be aware of what we're doing, because I think again, we get into that mindlessness. They call it the rat race. You're going to work, you wake up, you go to work, you come back home, you rinse and repeat, you do the same thing every day, and you go on autopilot. And then we're not realizing how little things that we're doing might be hurting other people,
Mhm.
or how things that we do help other people. Even just smiling and saying hi to people, holding a door open, doing something kind, that causes a huge ripple effect of positivity. And in the same respect, flipping someone off if they cut you off on the road, or, you know, saying something mean to someone also has the same ripple effect, but it's usually a negative ripple effect. And so, what are we wanting to put out into the universe? Are we wanting positivity because it ends up coming back to you? Or are
Right.
we wanting negativity because that comes back to you too? So, we have to be more conscious about what we say, what we think, what we do.
And people, when they look at karma, they look at karma as just that. They look at it as positive or negative. Karma also is when you have a point in time that is supposed to be fated. I mean, there's so many different ways of karma. And, you have organized religion that screams about offshoots like Wicca. And the fact of the matter is, one law in Wicca would really help everybody because whatever you put out there is coming back at you threefold. So if you really were practicing that, you might think about what you're doing. And that's
Yeah.
got a lot more attachment to it than, oh, I'm going to hell.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does. And also, I want to point out that often we create our own hell.
Mm-hmm.
Here on earth, we
Mm-hmm.
create our own hell with our thoughts. When we're constantly thinking, I'm a victim, life's not fair, nothing good ever happens to me. Well, if you believe in the law of attraction at all, or that we're energy and that the vibration we put out matches what the universe puts out, and if you're putting all of these negative things out there, the negative is going to come back. Then if you're constantly thinking that only bad things happen to me, well, you're calling more of that in, or at least you're focusing on that. You're going to see more of that instead of focusing on all of the blessings that you have, or all of the ways that life has been good to you. Like, look, I have these beautiful children. Look, I have this amazing podcast. Look, I have this beautiful backyard, and I get to sit outside and have my coffee and watch the birds every morning. Those little things, and showing gratitude for the things that we have, raises your vibration and brings in so many more things for you to be grateful for. And at the very least, it points your attention to all of the amazing and beautiful things about life, which I think is a big lesson from the universe too. Is look around you, look at the amazing things that we've created. Because for most of us, we have these blinders on, and we're just,
Oh, yeah.
I gotta go to work, I gotta come home, I have to do this, and we don't see the amazing and wonderful things that are all around us every day.
I was listening to an Instagram live yesterday with Zach Levy. He played Chuck and he's Shazam. And he was talking about, because he just wrote a book about his own mental health journey. And he was talking about that negative thought pattern. He's like, that's not us. That negative loop there, he didn't say exactly like that, is not us. We just listened to it. We
Yeah.
didn't put that in there. And that's the thing. That's what we really have to kind of, our ego. It's funny because, back in the 80s, the ego was, you are an egomaniac, you are conceited, but the ego is really more a darker thing about trying to protect you. And it's like, so all those negative things that your parents would tell you, dare I say, that to dumb it down would be the stove analogy. Don't touch the stove again. Well, everything is a stove according to your ego. And it's like, we're going to send you to go bowling now. We're going to put the little inflatable tube so you don't hurt yourself. But we're not put here on this earth to be just going down a bowling alley lane. We're supposed to go into the gutter occasionally. That's how we learn.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we have to turn off that negative talk and live in gratitude. That is very important.
Yeah.
But we
I
miss
saw a
that.
guy who had an amazing shirt, and it said, ego is not your amigo. And I loved it. I'm like, yes,
That
I
is
want that
good.
shirt.
That is good.
And it is
Um,
it is the fear-based thinking that creeps in, and it's learning how to tune it out.
well, in the younger generations, that's the thing. When you go back to your teachers or your parents, going for that outside validation, when you didn't get the outside validation and you thought you did something wonderful, there's that fear that's been placed, or that worry that has been placed because you didn't come to meet my expectations, which is a whole nother caveat because it's like, whose expectations are you living for? Are you living for your expectations or you're living for everybody else's? And that goes back to the people pleasing.
Yeah. And you'll never reach satisfaction or fulfillment if you're always looking for validation from others, because once you get it, you're like, okay, what's next? Who's next? What am I going to do next? It has to come from within. And I think for a lot of people, the difficulty is knowing how to validate yourself. How do I do that? Well, you do that by being proud of everything you do, rewarding yourself. And when you make mistakes, and as you said, there are no mistakes really, because it's all on purpose. We do things, fail just means first attempt in learning. It means it didn't work this way, so I should try it another way. Or that doesn't work, so I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do something different. It's just learning from everything that we do and understanding that if you make a mistake, what's the first thing that happens? People feel ashamed, right? I'm so dumb. I made that mistake. Learning how to let that go. You got to let that go. Not, how I can't believe I did that. Now I feel so ashamed. Look, that happened. Okay, moving on. Now, from this day forward, I know that I'm not going to do that same thing again. Or if that happens again, I'm going to react in a different way, but learning how to leave the guilt and the shame of it behind.
And I have to, this is going to be slightly off topic, but it's not. So you channel, and I know you channel,
Yeah.
and I'm intuitive. And the fact is, people would look at us and go, because this is the same argument. You've seen the meme, I'm sure, of, well, if you're intuitive or channeled or whatever, you should be able to get the lottery numbers. Well, here's the thing. Even though you're a channel or I'm intuitive, we don't necessarily always listen to our own selves. We may see the big glaring stop sign, the wedding dress. My wedding, my first wedding, the cake collapsed, the minister couldn't get the door open. I mean, there was many signs.
Yeah.
But did either one of us listen? No.
No.
Now, as we get older, sure, we listen a little bit more, but there's still, if we want something, we're still willing to touch that hot stove.
Yeah.
But it doesn't devalue your gifts.
Yeah. And it's easier, honestly, for me to channel for somebody else than for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because that ego will step in and say, what, is this really what you're getting? Or are you just making this up because it's what you want to do? So we have to battle with that too, which is why it is easier when you're working for somebody else and you're trying to channel for them than it is for yourself. And I'm not saying that we don't get the signs. Like you said, we do. They're there. They're glaring. But it's like that one meme where the girl's like, universe, give me a sign. And there's a stop sign laying over on her back.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, okay, but is that it? Like, no, that was the sign. Yeah.
Or is he coming back? Dump him.
Yes. Yes. I had a client get very angry with me. I wanted her money back because I didn't say what she wanted me to tell her, because I'm not going to. I'm not going to just tell you what you want to hear. And that's okay. I refunded her money because I was like, whatever. I want people to be happy, but I'm not going to just sit here and lie and tell you, everything. If I don't get something, I'm not going to just make it up and tell you. Like, I just say what I'm being given. And a lot of times I think people come when they're not ready to hear what's being told. I think, we have to be ready to accept the truth sometimes too. And I think a lot of people would rather live with a lie and false hope than really understand the truth and be able to work forward now, knowing like, okay, this relationship is DOA. It's not coming back. So do I sit here and waste my time wishing that it would, or do I move forward and try to find something better?
Right. And it's much easier to sit there and cling to the past. It's much easier that way.
Yeah, I was comfortable with that relationship where I wasn't really that happy anyway. So I want to go back to that instead of I have to now put myself out there, meet new people, and could possibly meet someone way better, because we often think too small for ourselves and the universe wants better things for us. And we're just willing to accept things that are just, okay.
I mean, I remember being the girl when my ex-husband called me. I was living up here and he was in Texas. He's like, we could get back together. And I was like, I don't know about that. And then seeing him, like, I think a couple of years later, and he gave me a hug, and all I could think was he still smelled the same. And it wasn't a good smell. It was just one of those things where it's like, and so I told my stepdaughter, and she's like, well, he's still hung up on you. I'm like, that's nice. I've moved on. It just, sometimes you just have to cut that contract that I'm done with this. I'm not. And I think when you get into a romantic relationship, there is a soul contract somewhere there, because you were brought in to teach lessons,
Hmm.
vice versa. So,
Yeah, and you agreed as souls to come in and to learn that. But we also have a little room, we also have free will. So
mhm,
even though we have the contract, you can get out of it if you've learned the lesson and you want to move on. And I think that I don't know if it's a subconscious thing, but I think a lot of people stay way too long where they know they shouldn't be, out of some sort of feeling of obligation, like I have to meet this contract. But the truth is, if you have learned the lesson that you came here to learn with the person, you're free to move on and you've fulfilled your obligation. You can move on and experience something else, because I think we do get hung up in that I have to stay.
yeah. Well, on that note, all the show notes will have your links for your podcast as well as your book. And I thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
So Melissa and I had an interesting conversation, and we talked about a lot of different things, and healing our traumas is a major thing. And I think it's something that we aren't taught how to deal with. And we should be experiencing more love in this world instead of the fear and the worry. We do need to flip that script in our head that keeps us stuck, that keeps us making these choices that we shouldn't make, because, well, as I said, you don't want to go bowling with the bumpers in the lane. You want to, if you hit a gutter, well, then you get out the gutter. Although in bowling, I know not necessarily you will, but I think you get the point. The ball comes back and you get to start over. And isn't that the way life is? You fall down, pick yourself up, and you keep going. So Melissa has a book out in her podcast, and I think you should check it out. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed the show today. If you missed an episode and would like to catch up, you can do so by going to better2podcast.com. That's better2podcast.com. And our social media links are there as well. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to be a guest on the show, please reach out to Donna at dmneedham.com. That's Donna at dmneedham.com. And as always, our sound is done by Rich Zai of Third Ear Audio. So I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, whenever you're listening. And I will catch you next time, guys. Bye. The Better 2 podcast is mixed, edited, and produced by Rich Zai of Third Ear Audio Productions.